So I wasn't originally planning on making a ranking video about this, but then I realized thanks to my Pixar marathon, I had seen literally every single one of these movies except 3.5. So I figured, why not bang the rest of out and make a video about it.
The Oscars aren't exactly known for holding animated movies in a super high regard, and that's being generous, but the best animated feature category seemed to be an apology for that. Well, at first anyway, this category has had some very strange history. What began as a way of honoring films in a medium that many people would write off as kid stuff eventually morphed into, just give it to whatever Disney or Pixar movie came out that year. But given how we've now had 3 years in a row without that happening, I think this is a good time to go over all of the movies that were declared the best animated film by the most prestigious group of film critics that everyone agrees doesn't actually matter, and see how they stack up against each other, as well as the other nominees of each year that I've seen to decide whether or not they deserve that title.
But the downside is I've already talked about more than half of these movies in 3 of my previous videos, so I figured I'd spice things up a bit by bringing in some help. I've assembled this diverse panel of my good friends Katie, Shane, Daniel, and Quinn, and for 3 movies each, which equates to half of the movies total, they're gonna give their thoughts on the movie as well. Now, to be clear, their opinions don't automatically link up with mine, and they have no control over where I put each movie in the ranking. I just figured this would be a nice way to keep it from being too repetitive from some of my older videos. With all that explained, let's get this show on the road.
Boo! You stink!
The best animated feature winners. Such an amazing lineup of work. Truly, some of the most beloved animated movies of all time. What the hell is going on there? Yeah, I think Brave winning this award is the second most infamous moment in the history of this entire category, with number 1 being the Lego movie not even being nominated. Like, seriously, why was this even an option? It's not a good movie. It's generic. It's boring. It's not funny. And the main characters are extremely annoying. The Queen is one of the most unlikable characters to ever come from a Pixar movie. She is completely unreasonable and obsessed with tradition, which does not make for someone I'm willing to sympathize with. And somehow Merida still manages to be annoying too, because aside from one cool scene where she takes command on the archery range, she spends the first half of the movie doing nothing but whining, and then buys a potion from a random old lady to change her mother. Boy, I sure hope this won't lead to an ironic twist. Oh no, it led to an ironic twist. Now she's a bear, because it went so well the first time an animated movie did it.
I think what pisses me off the most about Brave is not that it's bad, but it's that it didn't need to be bad.
If you watch the trailer for this movie, it actually looks pretty cool, and there are some snippets of good stuff in here. Like when Merida finds this ruined castle of a lost kingdom. That's great! I want to know more about this stuff. I want to know why the evil bear villain is such a threat. How did he even become a bear in the first place? Did his daughter also want him to change? I don't know, because the movie doesn't do anything with him. I know this movie had the director change halfway through production, and good God does it feel like it. I have no idea what the original movie was supposed to be like, but I really hope it was something more interesting than this. I don't care about the diplomacy of the kingdoms, I don't care about Merida's relationship with her mom, and I don't care about her being turned into something that would steal my picnic basket. The animation is good, and there's maybe a few funny lines, but the vast majority of this movie sucks. Everyone says Cars 2 was the end of Pixar's hot streak, but at least that movie is hilariously bad. This is just a complete waste of time. It's almost unanimously agreed upon as the worst movie to win this Oscar, and I could not possibly agree more. The fact that this was even nominated is ridiculous, but the fact that it won is infinitely worse. And this wasn't exactly a slow year. It was up against Wreck-It Ralph, which is vastly superior and totally should have won. I also wouldn't have been fine with Paranorman, and I haven't seen Frankenweenie or Pirates Band of Misfits, but I still think they deserved it more than this. They literally could not have made a worse possible choice. But on the bright side, almost everyone agrees that this was their biggest mistake, so that means this is the only one that'll make me mad, right?
While they wait for Tom Hanks to make Toy Story 4.
Gonna be honest with you, I didn't even bother rewatching these bottom 2 movies on the list, because I don't need to. They are bad movies, and no repeat viewings will change my mind on that.
Again, I know this movie has some defenders, and that's great and all, but I'm not one of them. I'm fully convinced this movie won purely for the brand name, because, oh, Toy Story, we gotta give it to Toy Story, it's Toy Story! I think this year is one of the most prominent examples of an just give it to Pixar, which sucks, because we literally just had the first non-Disney Pixar win in half a decade the year prior. I mean, I will give credit, the animation is outstanding. It is crazy how far technology has come since the first Toy Story film, and the opening 30 minutes with Forky is honestly pretty funny and endearing. I was genuinely enjoying myself throughout that part. Too bad it didn't last long. I know this movie's themes and morals are the most divisive aspect of it, but even when you take that out of the equation, I don't think this movie works. Most of the old characters get 1 or 2 lines maximum, so I question why they're even here. The new characters range from bland to extremely annoying. The story beats are all just repeats of the previous movies. 90% of the jokes are extremely unfunny, and above all else, it is boring. The vast majority of this movie is just them wandering around and talking about stuff, and since I'm not invested in the rehashed story and I'm not laughing at the jokes, I don't care about any of this. Woody questioning whether or not he has a purpose could be interesting, but it's barely explored, and Buzz, what did they do to you, man? You were one of the best characters in the first 2 movies, and now you just do whatever your voice box tells you? Good God, that is dumb. And as you guess, I'm one of the people that thinks the theme of this movie does not work. It completely contradicts Woody's arc from the second movie, and it makes the ending of the third one feel completely pointless. And this is coming from someone who didn't really like the ending of the third movie. But I still get why people do. It was supposed to be this big emotional moment of Andy giving something he cherished to Bonnie. Yes, of course, I'll take good care of them. Yeah, never mind, I don't care anymore. I know kids do stuff like this in real life, but that doesn't mean I think this was a good writing decision.
Now, I have heard some people say that the reason behind this is because Woody found a new purpose in his life of helping lost toys, and that's not a bad idea, but there's one teensy tiny little problem: they don't explain that at all.
Aside from one admittingly touching scene where they help Gabby find a new owner with this little girl, and some scenes that play during the credits, we don't see anything about helping lost toys in the entire movie. Now, if this were what Bo had been up to the entire time, maybe it could have worked. Like if the majority of the movie was her and Woody discussing whether or not they should help other toys, and Woody slowly warming up to it over time, then that might have been interesting. But they don't. Bo just says she loves being a lost toy because she loves being a lost toy. So she just ends up being extremely boring. Also, something I didn't realize until it was pointed out to me later was that she's made of freaking porcelain! How is she doing all these crazy stunts without shattering? It also would have been better if Woody told Buzz that he found a new purpose at the end about helping lost toys, but he doesn't. He doesn't even say anything. Buzz just says Bonnie will be okay without him, and he leaves. I guess you could argue that it's trying to say you shouldn't be with someone who doesn't care about you, but the other toys care about Woody. That's the whole reason he didn't go to college with Andy. So why is he leaving them now? Why didn't he just stay in the box and let the other characters go in the attic, or hide in the box with them? These are fine enough ideas on paper, but I don't think they were executed well, and I don't think they work for a Toy Story movie.
Honestly, with how underutilized these themes are, it really feels like they had the whole movie ready to go, and then they were like, oh crap, the main reason everyone loved the last movie so much was because they bawled their eyes out at the ending. We need to do that again. And then they just slap this in there at the last minute for the sake of being a tearjerker, not realizing that this is a tearjerker that does not work.
I'm sorry, but I do not like this movie at all. I'm not even a massive fan of the first three Toy Story movies, and even I felt insulted by this. It frankly should not have been made, and I can't believe this isn't even the last one. So I think it goes without saying by this point that it totally should not have won the Oscar. The only other nominee I've seen is How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, but I know for a fact that is much better than this, though I've heard Klaus is really good too, so maybe that should have won instead. There's also Missing Link, which I've heard is and I Lost My Body, which I know nothing about, but I'll just go out on a limb and say they're still better.
Well, thankfully we're done with the 3 out of 10s, which are the only winners on this list that I consider outright bad, and there's no 4 out of 10, so let's just step it up right to the 5s.
And what do you know? You're a penguin.
Remember I said earlier there was half a movie I hadn't seen before? Well, that's because we watched Happy Feet multiple times when I was in school, and not once did we ever finish it. I think the furthest I got was the last 30 minutes or so.
Either way, it's been a while since the last time, and I don't really remember too much about it, so let's finally sit down and watch this whole thing start to finish. I have no idea what I just watched.
This has got to be one of the weirdest and most lopsided movies I have ever seen in my life. It starts out as Footloose with penguins, and then it suddenly turns into Lawrence of Arabia. I'm not joking. The main plot of this movie starts with Mumble preferring to dance instead of sing, which is apparently a sin against nature, and then it turns into him and some other penguins going on a grand adventure to find where their fish supply has been running out for the last 7 years, and it's also a jukebox musical for some reason. Yeah, this is a lot like B-movie for me, where I have no idea what to really think of it. I mean, the animation's really good, the environments look absolutely amazing, and the penguins move pretty well, though their designs are extremely repetitive. It's nearly impossible to tell the difference between every single character in this movie that isn't Mumble, the Chief, or the Robin Williams macaroni penguin. Also, why do the female ones look so, developed? The song numbers don't really add much, with the exception of the one between Mumble and his girlfriend, but they do sound good, so that's something, I guess. The whole thing about singing versus dancing is pretty generic, and sure is fine for a basic kids movie, but as an adult, it's not too gripping. But then this movie goes weirdly kinda hard with the atmospheric moments. Like, it opens with 2 penguins singing a duet together, and then 5 minutes later we get this. I don't know what I'm looking at, but I kinda like it.
I mean, this was directed by George Miller, who also did the Mad Max movie, so moments like this do make a bit more sense when you realize that.
There's also a handful of chase scenes that don't really add much to the story, but they are entertaining, and some of the camera usage is pretty cool. Yeah, I think I spent about half of this movie just kinda tuned out, and the other half questioning what I was even watching, but not really in a bad way. I like when a movie gets more surreal sometimes, and it certainly makes this one a bit more interesting than just the dancing penguin movie, well, until the end where it suddenly becomes an environmental message. Yeah, as you guessed, the reason they're losing fish is because humans are overfishing, and it's not even trying to be subtle. It's kinda hinted at early on, but even then, it still feels like it just comes out of nowhere, and Mumble is able to get them to stop by dancing. Okay, that's just dumb. Happy Feet is easily the strangest movie to win in this category, and I didn't hate it, but I didn't really get much into it either. Did it deserve to win, though? Yeah, I'm gonna go with no on this one. I think 2006 was one of the slowest years in this category's history, since the only other nominees were Cars and Monster House. I haven't seen Monster House, but I haven't heard amazing things about it. I know Cars isn't a great movie, but I certainly think it's better than this. I can see why I never really sought out Happy Feet, because even as a kid, I was pretty indifferent to this movie, and those feelings haven't changed.
That's the only 5 out of 10 we got, so on to the 6s, which is kind of fitting given the title of our next entry.
That was his
Severe and continuous lapse in my judgment.
Genuine question, how did Big Hero 6 win? I know it was a big hit when it came out, but barely anyone talks about it anymore. And it came out the same year as some absolute bangers, so why did this, of all things, win? Like, it's not bad, it's a totally serviceable movie, but I have no idea why they decided that this was the best animated movie 2014 had to offer.
But then again, this was the same year they snapped an actual masterpiece, so maybe there was just a gas leak or something.
Anyways, like I said, this movie is fine. Pretty much everything about it is just kinda average. The animation is good, the city's kinda bland, but it looks cool, and the superhero stuff is passable enough. Honestly, I was kinda disappointed at first because I really like the dynamic between Hiro and Tadashi, but he's killed off in the first act, so that's great. Hiro is fine enough on his own, but I really would have liked to see more and him of Tadashi together. I know that's like the main point of the story, but still. Thankfully, Baymax is easily the best thing in the movie. I feel like he's the one thing everybody loves, and it's easy to see why. I'm convinced you need to have a heart of stone to hate this guy. He's just so lovable and adorable and pure and sweet, and no, I love this inflatable marshmallow so much. The side characters are just kind of whatever. They're not bad characters, but they're not particularly gripping either. The only one I'd say I don't like is the one voiced by TJ Miller, and it is due to the fact that he is voiced by TJ Miller. Why is he almost always the worst part of anything he's in? But thankfully, the different gadgets they use are pretty cool. The action scenes in this movie are really solid. I wouldn't say they're among the best I've seen from an animated movie, but their different abilities each character has leads to some really fun and creative fights.
There's only one thing about this movie I say is outright bad, and I'll give you 3 guesses as to what that is. A, the soundtrack, B, the runtime, or C, the villain. If your answer was C, you're telling the truth, because literally anyone who knows anything about this movie knows that's the worst thing about it.
Yeah, this guy's been ripped apart ever since the movie came out, and it's only increased with time. Him using the microbots is kinda cool, and he's not a bad idea on paper, but the execution is awful. Not only do they build it up as some big twist when it is painfully obvious that it's him, but he's just extremely poorly written. They try to have us sympathize with him, but then he literally shows no remorse when his top student was killed trying to save him. I get the idea is that he's consumed by grief, but he seemed perfectly normal at the beginning of the movie, so it really feels forced. And his play is just stupid. His daughter was lost in a portal because of an experiment, so now he's gonna rebuild the portal to suck the guy's company into it as well. Wouldn't it make more sense to just shove him into the portal as well? You know, give him the same fate he gave your daughter, or, you know, just call the freaking police? You have evidence that he was responsible for the death of your daughter. You can very easily sue him for that. You don't need to go through all this nonsense and get innocent people killed. Aside from this absurd stupidity, the rest of the movie is pretty serviceable. I had a decent time watching it, but I'm not gonna go out of my way to see it again. But it absolutely did not deserve to win the Oscar. The only other nominee I've seen is How to Train Your Dragon 2, which I know for a fact is vastly superior. I haven't seen Song of the Sea or The Tale of the Princess Kaguya, but I've heard they're both really good, so no idea why one of those didn't win. And then there's the Box Trolls, which, okay, I'll maybe give you that one. Again, I haven't seen it, but I haven't heard spectacular things about it. But none of those matter because this is the same year the Lego Movie came out, which honestly should have been a Best Picture nominee and winner, and again, it didn't even get nominated for this, so I don't know what was going on here.
But don't just take my word for it. I think it's finally time we turn our attention to our first panelist of the night, Katie.
Hard to know the general consensus on Big Hero 6. When it first came out, people really liked it, but as time went on, people grew less fond of it. I personally enjoy the movie, but it has its flaws. To start positive, I love the theme of grief here. Hiro learning to not let his grief consume him in the act of revenge is a very important message that many people can learn from. I also like most of the characters. Hiro has a decent arc, Tadashi was sweet, which makes his death even more tragic, Baymax had a charming voice, personality, and set of mannerisms, and this may be a hot take, but I thought Gogo, Wasabi, Honey Lemon, and even Fred were entertaining and played off each other well. The fight scenes were solid, and the idea of having superheroes with science-based powers is so cool. I love the gadgets everyone gets. And also they played a song from my favorite band during that montage, so guess which part of the movie is my favorite. With all that being said, this film has quite a few problems. To start with, I think the jokes are mediocre. Some of them are quite funny. I like Baymax low battery and Wasabi following traffic laws during the car chase, but most don't really get much of a reaction out of me. I also think the script is pretty weak. A lot of lines that are meant to be emotional callbacks, particularly look for a new angle, feel pretty forced. They are also pretty poor at establishing some forms of exposition. It feels kind of robotic, which can make some conversation scenes feel pretty dull. The biggest complaint with this film is the villain. To be honest, I don't think he's that bad. Don't get me wrong, he's not good, but I like some of the things they did with him. Having Callahan be a parallel to Hiro and how they deal with grief is great. and you can easily understand Callahan's anger at what happened to his daughter. It's also hinted that Callahan and Cray have tension when Callahan warns Hero of selling his microbots to Cray. And in general, that dynamic is really good. Many say that was his mistake ruins his character, but I honestly disagree. I think the line shows Callahan's grief and how it makes him lose his humanity. As a result, he's become a monster who's letting people die in order to get his revenge. That being said, he is still a weak villain. A lot of his moments when we first see him make him feel more bloodthirsty than he is later, which comes across as odd. The twist is also very easy to predict. Cray is such an obvious red herring, and it makes scenes of build-up feel like a slog since we don't really have as much mystery. Of the nominees I've seen, both How to Train Your Dragon 2 and Song of the Sea deserved Best Animated Feature and more. But if you ask me which film should have won, how did they not nominate the Lego Movie? It is such an amazing masterpiece in every way, and it was so popular that year. Why, Academy? Anyway, Big Hero 6 has a lot of enjoyable elements, but it also has quite a few weak points that prevent it from being exceptional. Solid enough, not much more than that.
And thankfully, we can now move on to the 7 out of 10s, which I think are overall pretty solid.
We'll say Clint Eastwood is the biggest yellow belly in the West.
Rango has got to be one of the least discussed winners in this entire category. Hell, I completely forgot about it until I looked up all the winners when I was in high school and went, oh yeah, that did exist. I never saw it growing up, and I never heard anyone talk about it.
But now I finally have, and it's a bit of a mixed bag for me, but leaning more towards the positive.
Starting off, the animation is honestly crazy impressive. This movie is almost 15 years old, and it holds up super well. And apparently the reason for that is because the movie's release was delayed a few times, so the animators just kept working on it, making it look even better. I mean, talk about some serious dedication to your craft. There's some really impressive atmosphere, and it gets pretty surreal at times. I gotta give credit for a kids movie that really does push the PG rating. There's some pretty gruesome stuff in here, which honestly makes sense for what's technically a Nickelodeon movie. Apparently they did this sort of emotion capture thing where the voice actors reenacted the movie as they were recording their lines, which doesn't make much of an impact on the animation, but I think it does help the voice acting, because it's really good. And a lot of the jokes are really funny, with my favorite being when they all run off to find the bandits, only to realize they have no idea where they are, so they just awkwardly go back. But a lot of the main aspects of this movie are kinda hit or miss. Most of the characters are pretty generic. Rango's decent enough, Beans is alright, Priscilla's hilarious, and Rattlesnake Jake is one of the most threatening villains I've seen in an animated film. His design and voice are just so freaking cool, and this is one of the most badass lines I have ever heard.
Go to hell.
Where do you think I come from?
But aside from those four, everyone else is really forgettable, and the story feels like a pretty generic Western movie. Some of the things they do with how small the town is are creative, and again, there are some really weird moments, but that's it. The rest of the movie is just trying to figure out what happened to the water, which isn't very hard to figure out. And of course, we get an annoying liar revealed scene, one of the most annoying cliches in all of film that brings the movie to a screeching halt. We know he's going back, get on with it already. I did enjoy watching Rango, but it's not a movie I'm really itching to go back to. There's some really impressive elements, but I can't say it's a great movie. And did it deserve to win the Oscar? Pfft, no. This came out the same year as Kung Fu Panda 2, the best DreamWorks movie ever. It was better than Puss in Boots though, and I know nothing about Chico and Rita or A Cat in Paris, but the latter does look pretty fun, so maybe I'll check that out at some point.
Frankly, the most interesting thing about this movie was the fact that it broke Pixar's record-breaking 4-year win streak, and it was the only winner from 2006 to 2018 that wasn't from Pixar or Disney.
And that's because Disney didn't make a movie that year, and the only Pixar film was Cars 2, which was unfairly snubbed. Hey, if Shark Tale and Brave can get nominated, so can this.
But those are just my thoughts on the movie. Let's see what Quinn thinks.
I'm not sure I trust Rango around women. Rango, what's there to remember about this movie? The plot is a liar-revealed story, and with those 3 words you know exactly how this movie will play out. Rango is thrown into a situation he does not 100% understand, fails upwards and gains the town's respect, is publicly called out and is banished, and then finally returns, saves the day, and once more gains the town's respect. So with the plot out of the way, let's talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of this movie. I like how many of the objects throughout the town incorporate trash in some way. The town's clock is a slightly broken pocket watch, structures incorporate discarded cans and bottles, and possibly my favorite is the town's bank stores its water reserves in an abandoned 5-gallon jug with markings indicating how many days worth of water are available. This single item is able to convey the ticking clock situation, and also allows for later scenes where Rango and friends attempt to retrieve the town's water reserve after it is stolen. Another thing that I appreciate about this movie is that it is a Western. I cannot say I've seen any other Western movies for kids, or really any other Western movies for that matter, outside of Back to the Future 3, so I can respect that this movie was trying something different. Unfortunately, the unique genre is the most memorable thing about this movie. It being a Western is the only thing I would have been able to semi-confidently tell you before rewatching it. So much so that I would have been able to tell you about the existence of a character with a fake leg before I could tell you the central plot of the movie involved water in any way. Maybe I'm being a bit harsh because it's been at minimum 10 years since I last saw this movie, and maybe this time I'll remember it more, but I never seem to see anyone talking about this movie, so make of that as you will. Now for the ugly. I don't like Beans. As a character, she's fine and plays a semi-important role in terms of Dirt's overall water problem, but they gave her human hair and on multiple occasions have her lock up and just stare at you. Overall, this movie's fine, and it's infinitely rewatchable because you will never remember a single thing about it.
Buckle up, Millie. We're doing a Shrek.
Well, it was only a matter of time before I inflict the rage of the brokers by saying Shrek isn't all that great, so it's only fitting that I do it a second time as well. Yeah, as I said in my DreamWorks ranking, I think this movie is pretty good, but I don't really get why it was such a cultural phenomenon. I mean, I guess I can kinda understand. When it first came out, it was pretty new and interesting. 2001 was hot off the heels of the Disney Renaissance, and most people agree that after around Tarzan, Disney wasn't quite hitting the same highs they used to. So for a movie like this to come out and be a very clear satire of the biggest animation studio in the world by taking the fairy tale-esque aesthetic and making something much more crude and modern and disgusting out of it, it definitely caught people's attention. And it was the movie that really put DreamWorks on the map after their previous films varied in terms of box office results. So people have a lot of nostalgia for this movie, and it very much lived on through later decades, primarily through memes, so that combined with the fact that it was the first movie to ever win Best Animated Feature does kind of make sense why this movie was accepted into the National Film Registry at the Library of Congress in 2020.
Which is why it kind of disappoints me to say that I don't love this movie the same way a lot of other people do. I watched it multiple times throughout my life, and every time I just thought, what am I missing here? What do people see in this movie that I don't?
Well, I think there's two main things. One is, honestly, nostalgia. I only saw this movie once or twice when I was a kid, and I didn't remember that much of it, so that's probably why I don't have as big of a connection to it as most people do. And two, like I said in my DreamWorks ranking, I don't really think this movie has an amazing script. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some great lines in here, like when Shrek compares ogres to onions and Donkey's first thought is, they stink, and Shrek almost agreeing with him, that is hilarious. Or when Shrek says he has to save his ass, that's predictable, but it's still great. But a large portion of the jokes I feel are only really funny because of the delivery, and even then, some of them just fall a little flat for me. I think this movie shines a lot better in the visual humor, like when the dwarves put Snow White on Shrek's dinner table, or when Fiona cooks the bird eggs. That's just gold. The emotional moments work well enough. I really like the scene where Shrek and Donkey tunk under the stars, and you really do see the connection Shrek and Fiona start to form. It's pretty sweet. Too bad they basically throw it all out the window for some stupid forced misunderstanding cliche. I'm so glad this is the one part of the movie that pretty much everyone hates, because it is the #1 problem with it for me. I mean, yeah, I know it's supposed to be a reflection of Shrek's insecurities, but it still feels insanely forced, and we've seen it a million times already in other movies. If Shrek came to this conclusion on his own without overhearing her, or if Farquaad showed up first thing in the morning and it felt awkward, maybe it would have worked a bit better, but on its own, it's just obnoxious and leads to easily the most boring part of the movie. But at least the climax has some good laughs and a genuinely great message to it. So on most of the third act blows, the ending is pretty good. The only downside is it's the reason almost every animated movie for the next decade had to end with a dance party. And side note, rest in peace, Steve Harwell. I do like Shrek, but I don't think it's an amazing movie, and I certainly don't think it deserved to be the first winner in this category. I'll give it the edge over Jimmy Neutron. That one's good, but nothing amazing, but Monsters, Inc. is the easy winner for me. That's the movie I've loved ever since I was a kid. I also find it really funny that DreamWorks was the first studio to win, and then 20 years later, they've never won again. Well, okay, there is Wallace and Gromit, but that was a co-production that was primarily made by Armin, so that's more of a half win. Either way, Shrek is a solid movie, but I think it's a bit overhyped. That Shrek Retold, on the other hand, that's a cinematic masterpiece.
Sorry to disappoint you all with my opinions again, so here's someone who actually does love Shrek to hopefully get you off my tail. Daniel, you're up.
I'm so sorry he lied to you saying that Shrek wasn't the best film ever made. He lied, and now I'm gonna tell you the truth.
But it's not the best film ever made. I thought that was Shrek 2.
Oh, sorry. Oh my god, I'm so sorry. I lied to you. So I know you're all wondering, why is Shrek so great? What makes Shrek so good? Why do I love Shrek so much? Why am I so obsessed with Shrek? Well, Leo Tolstoy once defined art as a means of union among men, joining them together in the same feelings, and that is why I love Shrek so much. One word, humanity. A lot of people say that Shrek is, just a parody of Disney, and yes, it's true, it's a great parody of Disney, but it's so much more than that. It transcends the average animated adventure film by taking an incredible journey and putting humanity inside of it. Every interaction between Shrek and Donkey feels so raw and real and relatable, and that's why the lines that don't sound funny get a laugh, because they sound just like real conversations. This film has a beautiful exploration of the human condition and what it feels like to be othered by society. Shrek and Donkey, in my opinion, their relationship is the centerpiece of this film. Shrek and Donkey's relationship are what ultimately pushes him to completing his character arc. Oh my god, I need to talk about Donkey. I need to talk about how important important Donkey is. I love Donkey so much. First of all, Donkey is funny, that's just a given. He's played by Eddie Murphy. But secondly, he has so much depth to him. He's innocent and he's sweet. He sees the good in people no matter where he goes. He's never afraid of Shrek, not once. He's always welcoming and kind towards Shrek, and he's so lovable and warm and friendly. We all need a friend like Donkey. And Donkey also did something else very, very, very important. Donkey single-handedly saved the third act of the film. Now, in other animated films, such as Ice Age, the comic relief character, such as Sid, is usually, crapped on and, treated as the butt of the joke throughout the story, which can get old. And there is a lot of that in Shrek, but Shrek does something very, very special. Shrek takes this common trend and it acknowledges it. Donkey, in his confrontation with Shrek in the third act, he calls Shrek out for Shrek's behavior, for how Shrek was dismissive of him, for how Shrek was mean to him and insulted him. Direct quote from the movie, by the way. But Donkey goes ahead and forgives Shrek. He demands to be respected, but also offers forgiveness. And this, in turn, is what pushes Shrek to finally go and storm a wedding and have a man be eaten by a dragon, but he deserved that, The pacing of the relationship throughout the film, it's just so perfect because you can see Donkey fishing Shrek out of his loneliness, and it happens slowly. There are even scenes where Donkey doesn't entirely understand what Shrek is talking about, such as the onion scene, but that's okay because Donkey is still there to listen, and that's what's most important. And then you have the night scene with the stars, and you have Shrek finally open up to Donkey because Donkey is willing to listen. I think the moral of the story is, we all need a friend like Donkey. Donkey's wonderful. Be more like Donkey. Donkey for president. 2028.
When you pop in this game, the first thing you notice is the poor edging on Woody.
Oh boy, time to piss off the Toy Story 3 stands again. Yeah, I'm sorry, I just don't get into the series as much as most people do, and this one in particular seems to have the biggest disconnect between my opinion and everyone else's. The movie starts out really strong, but once they enter the daycare, I'm not really as invested. This just isn't a very interesting location to me, and since the movie takes itself a lot more seriously, there aren't as many jokes, so I don't have a great time watching it. I know it's not really supposed to be pleasant, but I'm still not very engrossed by what's going on here.
And I think part of that is, I'm just not a huge fan of the characters.
For the old characters, Woody is still decent enough, though his arc in this movie feels kind of sidelined because of how many other characters there are. Jesse, Rex, and Mr. Potato Head still get some good laughs, but I never really got into Ham or Slink, Bullseye's barely in it, and Buzz getting switched to demo mode just kind of feels like an excuse to make him act like a space ranger again just because it's tradition by this point. The Spanish mode is pretty funny, so I'll give it a bit of a pass. For the new characters, the only one I really found interesting was Lotso. All of his henchmen are completely forgettable, and am I the only one who didn't really care about Barbie and Ken? Like, they got a few laughs here and there, but for the most part, I wasn't really a fan of these two. And I still have issues with the story. Like, I find it pretty stupid that the others didn't believe Woody when he said Andy was putting them in the attic. I know something similar happened in the first movie, but at least that was kinda understandable. Here, they've known him for a decade by this point. Why would he lie to them? And I'm sorry, but I feel like the ending is trying way too hard to make you cry. Andy said his toys were old junk in the beginning of the movie, and now he's suddenly acting all sentimental towards them. I get he's playing with a little kid, but like I said in my Pixar ranking, he's literally never seen her before, so why is he doing this? If these things really meant so much to him, why is he giving them to a complete stranger? How does he know she's not gonna throw him away and never touch him again? Do his toys mean anything to him or not?
Sorry, I know that was a lot of complaining. I just felt like I had to get that out of the way as to explain why I'm not a huge fan of this movie. Let's actually get to the good stuff now.
For starters, the animation is really good. It's a pretty massive jump from the first two movies, which makes sense given the time gap, and it looks great. Like I said earlier, I think the opening is really strong. The fantasy scene is really creative, and them discussing the impact of Andy leaving for college is interesting. I think it goes downhill when he puts them in the bag, but the rest of it is really good. Lotso is a delightfully hateable villain, and his backstory is both tragic, but also kind of funny, and the prison escape scene is easily the best part of the movie. This feels a lot more like the stuff from the first two movies. It's creative, exciting, and really funny. I wish the movie had at least one or two more scenes like this. And the climax of the dump gets pretty intense, but it actually feels warranted. So for those of you keeping track, this movie starts out strong, wavers in the middle, picks up for the third act, and then kinda whimpers out at the end. Overall, I do think Toy Story 3 is a good movie, but I think it's pretty overhyped, and controversial opinion, but I don't think it deserved to win the Oscar. I know it was guaranteed because it was nominated for Best Picture too, but I don't care. I think How to Train Your Dragon is way better, and frankly, that should have been nominated for Best Picture. I mean, it has a higher Rotten Tomatoes score, so yeah. Take that. I guess this is a long way to pay back for Shrek being Monsters, Inc. Oh, yeah, there's also The Illusionist, which I know nothing about, so we'll just put that at the bottom.
I was frozen today!
Frozen. Frozen. The movie that took the world by storm in 2013 became Disney's most successful film since The Lion King and holds the record for being universally considered the most overrated animated movie of all time.
But wait, is something actually overrated if everyone says it's overrated?
Whatever, you get the point. Despite being the highest grossing animated movie ever when it first came out, almost everyone quickly turned on this movie because of how oversaturated oversaturated it was. I mean, this film was everywhere, and I mean everywhere, so it's pretty easy to see why people got sick of it. But I think enough time has passed and the hype has mostly died down, so I can put all that aside and judge this movie as objectively as possible. This is one of only 2 Disney movies that I actually saw in theaters as a kid, with the other being Wreck-It Ralph, and I remember enjoying it fine, but not exactly loving it. I then moved on, keeping this opinion in my head for the following decade, and I never actually rewatched it, until I finally decided to give it another look and be able to collect my full feelings on it.
And safe to say, nothing has changed. I still think this movie's pretty good, but nothing crazy.
I think people would be a bit more forgiving of it if you didn't hear Let It Go every 5 seconds for a good 4 years, because taking that out of the equation, the movie's pretty solid. It pays tribute to the traditional Disney fairy tales, but it takes a much more logical approach to them, even outright saying you can't marry someone you just met, which some people might not be thrilled about, but with the story it's trying to tell, I think it works fine. The animation is great, as to be expected, and the songs vary in quality. They can be a highlight, like For the First Time in Forever, or honestly Let It Go. Hey, that sequence is genuinely cool, but they can also be the lowest points in the movie. I never liked Do You Want to Build a Snowman, and I genuinely forgot Fixer Upper was in it. The characters are all pretty solid. Anna is a very likable lead, and her desire to break free and experience things she's missed out on is believable and interesting, despite it being similar to some previous Disney characters, while on the flip side, Elsa wants to shut herself away from everyone else to the point where she literally runs off into the mountains. It's interesting how the two of them were basically given the same origins, yet came with completely different outlooks, which makes sense given the circumstances. As for the side characters, Kristoff is basic, but he's pretty funny and has a good back and forth with Sven. Olaf is one of the more divisive comic relief Disney characters, though I think the negative side comes more from the sequel. Here I think he's actually pretty funny, and thankfully he never feels like he's hogging the spotlight. I mean, that impaled joke still makes me laugh. And then there's Hans. I don't really know how to feel about him. While he wasn't the first twist villain in a Disney movie, he is the beginning when Disney really started to use them a lot, and personally, I'm split on it. On the one hand, yes, it does come basically out of nowhere, and it wasn't really needed since we already had a passable antagonist in the form of the Duke, but on the other hand, it does work with the theming of how Anna is too open while Elsa is too closed. He's not one of the best Disney villains ever, but I don't hate him like most people do. And honestly, he leads to my favorite scene in the movie where Anna sacrifices herself to save Elsa. The animation as she freezes and Hans' sword shatters against her is honestly beautiful, and I like how they put a spin on the true love cliche, since it's her sister that saves her rather than her love interest.
But aside from that, I think the rest of the movie's just kind of standard.
It's kind of weird how this is the movie that took over the world for a while, since a vast majority of it is solid, but nothing that hasn't been done better in plenty of other movies. It doesn't have as many glaring flaws as the movies I put below it do, at least in my opinion. It's just a passable enough movie and nothing much more. So did it deserve to win? Sure, I guess. It's not amazing, but 2013 was a pretty slow year, so what else would it have gone to? The Croods, a movie I honestly thought was mediocre, Despicable Me 2, the only Illumination movie to ever be nominated, and even then it's also a 7 out of 10, The Wind Rises, which is commonly regarded as one of the most middling Studio Ghibli movies, or Ernest and Celestine, a movie I've literally heard nobody talk about. I mean, maybe that movie's amazing, but I have no idea. Honestly, I think Monsters University was a much better movie than Frozen, but that didn't even get nominated, so this winning was fine by me. Honestly, I just think it's funny that this was the first non-Pixar Disney movie to ever win. No, seriously, the studio that arguably defined animated movies didn't win Best Animated Feature until 12 years after the category was introduced. I mean, I know the category was made after their most successful lineup of films, but still, I think that's funny.
That's all the 7s, so now it's time for some sweet, sweet 8s.
Yes. 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 Yes.
Coco for me is one of those movies that starts out kinda but gets much better as it goes on, so I was pretty curious to see if my feelings would change on a rewatch since I actually know where it's going.
Short answer, no. Still not a big fan of the first 20 minutes.
I get why it's important to the story, but this is stuff we've seen a million times already, and the family's hatred of music, while mildly understandable, just feels really hammered in, and the grandma especially feels way too over the top. The fact that she doesn't even flinch after breaking the guitar when Miguel is clearly upset, like, come on, I feel like that's a bit too far to make her likable. I get what they're trying to go for, but it's just not very enjoyable for me. Now, thankfully, the movie turns on once Miguel takes the guitar and enters the land of the dead. This is one of the most interesting worlds in Pixar history. The design is great, and the colors are so vibrant. Plus, I love the way the skeletons and the spirit guides look. It's so creative, and since I already knew the twist of Hector being Miguel's true great-grandfather going in, it was cool being able to spot all of the foreshadowing moments, which there are a surprisingly large amount of in here. I still really like Miguel and Hector's chemistry. Dante is adorably ugly and has some really funny moments. The songs are fantastic, and the more somber moments do work really well. I can't think of any other movie that has a more linear progression of quality than this one, because it literally just gets better and better as it goes. The beginning isn't all that great, but then the next part is pretty good, the middle is great, the climax is fantastic, and the ending is just amazing. Without a doubt, the best part of the movie, and one of the best endings to any animated movie I've ever seen.
Aside from the opening, my only issue with this movie is that while the comedy is good, it's surprisingly not that memorable.
I got quite a few laughs at this movie, like the joke about the guy at the desk being allergic to Dante, despite him not having hair and the guy not having a nose, and Hector borrowing some guy's femur and losing it, but but I did not remember these jokes at all, and I can't recall that many more than that. Now, it did lead to the second viewing still being very funny, but it doesn't really stick with me as much as some other movies. Coco is often regarded as one of Pixar's modern masterpieces, and sadly I don't quite seem to love it as most people, but unlike Shrek or Toy Story 3, I fully understand why it gets as much praise as it does, because the good stuff in it is really good. It just has a handful of things that I think could have been improved. This was the case of another Pixar win, but it's one people didn't get very mad at, since even in the past, a movie like this probably would have won. Well, the only other nominee I've seen in this Lost Baby, and I guess I'd say it's better. I can't even finish that comment. But from what I've heard, Ferdinand is mad, The Breadwinner is solid, but nothing amazing, and Loving Vincent does sound pretty interesting, so I might check that out at some point. Either way, I'm fine with Coco winning, since while it was predictable for more than just the studio name.
And the balloons?
I happen to like balloons.
And we are back to Up. Don't really have much to say about this one, since I feel like I covered most of it in the Pixar ranking. The open and 10 minutes are very good, but I don't think they're the colossal sob fest that everyone says they are. The animation is solid, and the score is absolutely phenomenal. That also won the Oscar for a very deserved reason. Carl and Russell have a really good dynamic, since their respective pessimism and optimism leads to some really funny exchanges. Doug is one of the most adorable characters in all of fiction, and Kevin looks funny, though she doesn't really leave a huge impact. The jokes in this movie are a bit hit or miss. There are some really good bits, like, well, pretty much anything with the dogs, both the good and the bad, but aside from those guys, I don't really remember a huge amount.
I think the middle chunk of the movie is the weakest part for me.
Carl and Russell going on this little excursion is neat and all, but I don't find it as interesting as a lot of the higher movies on this list. And while there are some really good moments, like when Russell talks about the boring moments being the things he remembers the most, the majority of it is just kind of standard. It's not bad, but I can't exactly say I love it either. Thankfully, things pick up again once they find Charles Muntz. I think he's one of the best Pixar villains, since the twist isn't super shocking, but it does make sense. You can really see just how much this hunt for the beast has taken a toll on his mental state. He's been looking for this thing for the vast majority of his life, and he's clearly gone off the deep end. The part where he threatens Carl and alludes to killing anyone else who's come by is honestly pretty creepy, but he also has some funny moments during the climax. Hell, this is one of the most nerve-wracking climaxes in any animated movie I've seen, solely due to how high up in the air they are. One little slip could kill either of them at any moment, which makes things way more suspenseful. I wouldn't quite say Up is an absolute masterpiece, but it is a movie I enjoy and respect quite a bit. Unlike Toy Story 3, I can see why this got a Best Picture nomination, since it is very enjoyable and very well made. It's just not one of my all-time favorites. Now, because it was nominated for Best Picture, the win was guaranteed, but do I think anything else deserved it? Personally, not really. The Princess and the Frog is on a similar level for me, but I still think Up is much better. I liked Fantastic Mr. Fox, but I didn't get into it as much as most people do, and I haven't seen Coraline or The Secret of Kells, but I've heard they're quite good. 2009 is often considered one of the best lineups in the category's history, and that's a pretty fair opinion, but even still, I think they made the right choice.
You also have to navigate many bodies of water, which makes much of the late game incredibly tedious.
Word of advice, do not watch this movie when you have to pee. Anyways, Flow is unique in that it was the first independent movie to win Best Animated Feature, the most recent winner at the time of this video, and one I wanted to see in theaters, I just never got a chance.
But now I can finally talk about it here, and it is shockingly good, especially for the circumstances of how it was created.
I mean, for a movie made on a budget of roughly $3 million in Blender, a free animation software, it looks crazy impressive. The environments are simple, but still appealing. The animals all have so much emotion and personality, and the water, oh my god, just look at that water. It is so lovely. The movie is also really ambitious in that it's told entirely with no dialogue. It is purely visual storytelling, which works really well given its simple narrative. It's just about a cat that gets caught in a flood and hitches a ride with some other animals, but it still manages to suck you in with its very nature-heavy world, and again, the emotion on the animals. Their expressions are so varied, and you're able to tell exactly what they're thinking without them having to say a word. And they still move like real animals, which just makes it incredibly charming. Crazy how a low-budget movie made in a country some people have never heard of is able to do realistic yet expressive animals better than the second most expensive animated movie of all time. This movie is absolutely adorable. You really do get sucked in by just watching this little cat try and stay afloat in this crazy world. Making the main protagonist a cat was a really smart idea, since they are an animal famous for not liking water, and on top of that, he's just so cute. The movie is surprisingly soothing too. There isn't that much music, and since there's no dialogue, the only sounds you hear are an occasional animal noise, the flowing of the water, and the ambient sounds of nature. It's really nice and makes you appreciate the beauty of, well, nature.
As good as this movie is, though, I can't really say I love it for a couple of reasons.
One is that while its simplicity does work, I don't think this movie is going to stick with me as much as some of the higher movies on this list, since while I do remember the overall experience, the individual moments don't stick with me as much. And the second is that the ending feels weirdly abrupt. We get kind of a mini climax with trying to save the others from falling down a cliff, but it only lasts a few minutes. They look in a puddle, and then the movie doesn't really end, it just kind of stops. I thought that was a little weird. Admittedly, I watched this movie kind of late at night, which might not have been the best idea since I was a bit tired, and I feel like you really need to be in the right headspace for a film like this. So maybe I need to see it again, but either way, it's a movie I really admire, and it's definitely worth checking out. Now, did it deserve to win? I have no idea. I think this is the most conflicted I've ever been on a winner, because on the one hand, this movie is really good, and it's great that an independent movie finally won, but on the other hand, Wild Robot was so good! Honestly, I think this is the absolute best lineup the category has ever had. You could argue that any of these movies should have won, and this is the only time where I would have been fine with any nominee winning. Vengeance Most Foul is the weakest in my opinion, but it's still really charming. Flow, again, is adorable and really ambitious. Inside Out 2 is great, though I'm fine with us not winning since Pixar has enough wins already. I think Wild Robot is the best, and I haven't seen Memoir of a Snail, but I've heard it's really good. I also think it would have been nice if Transformers 1 got nominated, but oh well, the lineup we got is still great. I don't personally agree with Flow winning, but I'm not exactly mad either, since while it's not one of my favorites, it's still very lovely.
It's been a while since we heard from one of the panelists though, so Daniel's coming back for round 2.
I love cats. This is a beautiful film. I can't believe it was made in Blender. That's so incredible and impressive. First of all, the character designs are absolutely perfect. Take notes, Lion King. The animals look realistic, but they're also expressive, and they move in a way that just makes you inherently want to care about them. They're not going with the, oh, it's an adorable cat, oh, it's an adorable puppy route. They're making you care about them because these are lives, and we should inherently care about life. This is a film that, while animated, utilizes a lot of live-action techniques, and it utilizes them very, very well. There are a lot of continuous shots, not just in the chasing scenes, but also the scenes where the cat is underwater, and it really just shows how beautiful the world looks, but also how dangerous it is. I think the score also complements the cinematography very well. It's something very important in filmmaking, not just having the individual parts work on their own, but having them complement each other in unison. The cinematography and the score and all the different shots portray the world as simultaneously a place to be in awe of and a place to be afraid of. And this theme is central to the cat's character arc. The cat's character arc is that he needs to accept that in order to experience all the joys and beauty of life, he needs to be okay that he'll be in danger sometimes. And he accepts the danger of the world by learning to look outward more rather than exclusively look inward. The repeated imagery of the mirror in the film is very important to this theme. There's the mirror on the boat, of course, but also the cat looking at his own reflection in the window instead of looking at the dog outside. The final shot of the film is an excellent conclusion of this imagery because the cat, along with his friends, looks at his reflection in the water and the ripples fracture his reflection. But he has friends now, and that's okay. He's in acceptance of how he needs to look outward more and not just exclusively inward, and accept that he lives in a messed up world. This film is an example that you don't need a huge budget to make a film beautiful. All you need is heart.
Happy birthday to you. You live in a zoo.
I feel like people tend to forget just how big of a deal Zootopia was. This movie made an absurd amount of money when it came out. In fact, it was Disney's second highest grossing film ever at the time, behind Frozen. And despite being very well received, not too many people talk about it anymore, at least compared to a lot of other Disney movies from the time period.
Which is a shame because I think this is easily one of the best Disney movies to come out of the 2010s.
The biggest point of contention people have with this movie is the message. It's very clearly depicting a story about racism, only with animals instead of people. And personally, I think it overall works very well. While there's maybe one or two moments where it feels a little ham-fisted, there's significantly more moments that are really powerful. And I think what primarily makes it work is the fact that it isn't a one-to-one allegory for real life. Predators don't represent one group of people while prey represents another. It's left very ambiguous, and it not only shows the prejudice against both sides, but it shows how prejudice for one can lead to prejudice against another. I think that's really clever.
But even if you take that out of the equation, the movie is still really good. It's engaging, funny, creative, and it looks amazing.
I'm honestly kind of shocked at how good this movie's animation is. It is a huge step up from the other Disney movies at the time. The city of Zootopia is extremely creative, with all the different biomes and the ways the different animals operate, which leads to some amazing world building. The characters are all very likable. Judy is such an endearing protagonist, and you really do want to see her succeed. And Nick's arc about becoming more than what people expected of him is great, especially when you learn his backstory, which is really messed up when you think about it. On top of that, this movie is hilarious. Making the crime boss a possum is great. The whole exchange between Judy and Nick involving his tax evasion is gold, and I love the subtle line about bunnies being good at multiplying. And the sloth DMV scene has got to be one of the most painfully hilarious things I have ever seen. I can't think of anything that made me laugh and infuriated me this much.
Aside from some hiccups with the theming, there's only one issue people tend to have with this movie, and it is, once again, the villain. What is going on with you, Disney?
It's a shame because out of all the twist villains Disney has done, this is by far the one that is easiest to fix. Literally just show her getting angry at Lionheart 1 or 2 times and this wouldn't feel like it comes out of nowhere for the sake of subversion. Hell, as I was rewatching this movie, I noticed 2 scenes where it could have been placed perfectly. When she's pushed aside in the beginning and when Judy and Nick visit Z Hall. That's literally all you had to do to make this twist work. But instead, it just comes right out of nowhere even though it's pretty obvious and isn't revealed until the last 10 minutes. So it just feels forced and really basic. It's a shame because that, plus maybe a couple less interesting moments, are the only things I don't really like about this movie. Well, along with the Naturalist Club scene. That was weird. Why is that in here? Because I really enjoyed the rest of Zootopia. I'm kinda sad I didn't see it when it first came out. I only watched it for the first time a few years ago, but I think it's really solid, and unlike most people, I am glad it won the Oscar. I know most people say Moana should have won, but I'm gonna be honest, I didn't get into that movie as much as most people did. I haven't seen the other nominees, though from what I've heard, Kubo and the Two Strings is kinda divisive, don't know much about the Red Turtle, and My Life as a Zucchini. What even is that?
Alright, those are the only 8s here, so that means half of this list is a 9 out of 10 or higher. Safe to say, I'm very excited about that.
Listen, I don't want to cause any panic, but the beast isn't actually dead yet.
The beast isn't actually dead yet?
I don't really have much left to say about Curse of the Were-Rabbit, other than the fact that I've now officially seen their second feature, Vengeance Most Foul, and I can officially confirm that this is still the best thing to feature Wallace and Gromit's name. It's got just about everything you could possibly want from them. A simple story with mildly dark elements that are also very comedic, 2 endearing leads with a colorful cast of side characters, super impressive and energetic clay animation, and above all else, some of the best jokes and gags to ever come from an animated movie. I stand by what I said about this being one of the funniest animated movies I've ever seen in my life. In fact, with maybe 1 or 2 exceptions, this might be the funniest movie on this list. The plane chase gag still has me howling with laughter every time. I love how Lady Toddington is almost always dressed like a vegetable, and Victor is one of the most delightfully petty villains I've ever seen. Almost every single time he shows up, you are guaranteed to laugh at least once. He tries to act all proper and respectful, but he constantly embarrasses himself and just comes across as a complete idiot. Dude literally only has 3 golden bullets to kill the giant rabbit, and he wastes 1 of them just trying to get people's attention. Though I think the funniest character in the entire movie is the Reverend. His reactions throughout the whole thing are downright priceless.
To me, this is one of the best examples of a movie that's only meant to be funny. It doesn't really try to have a complex story with deep character arcs, it just wants to make you laugh, and it more than succeeds at that goal.
The little story and character moments we do have are pretty solid. The monster movie angle is very entertaining, and it's really nice to see Gromit get some sort of recognition at the end for helping. Again, the only issue I have is it feels like Wallace turns back just because, when they were seemingly setting up an actual explanation for it earlier. Other than that, this movie is great, and I'm really happy it won the Oscar. I'll admit I haven't seen Corpse Bride or Howl's Moving Castle, but those movies have to be pretty freaking good to top this comedic gem. Also, this is the only year in the category's history where none of the nominees were computer animated. Weird.
Where is my mother?
Yeah, hi, this is Future Me. Just editing this right now. Wanted to pop in real quick and say, I, for the life of me, could not find good quality clips of The Boy and the Heron. Like, trust me, I got like 2, that were okay, a couple of trailers, and a thing from the Oscars ceremony, and then like, that was it. That was literally all I can get. I know Ghibli is like really, really strict with its copyright rules, so like, I could barely find anything anywhere. I had a little bit more luck with Spirited Away, but even still, there was not that much I could find. So, yeah, if anyone out there knows more about this than I do and knows like where to get high quality clips of Ghibli films and stuff, please let me know, because I wouldn't mind talking about more of them in the future, but like, I could barely find any of this stuff, so apologies if this next section seems a little rushed. It's just that's literally all I can get my hands on. I'm making the best with what I can work with. Again, feel free to let me know in the comments if you have a better option.
I was very interested in watching The Boy and the Heron again, since I hadn't seen it since it came out, and I'm not gonna lie, I definitely noticed the issues with this movie a lot more this time around, but don't be fooled, it's still great. This is one of the most abstract and creative worlds I've ever seen in an animated film. The idea of it bridging multiple planes of existence while also being a connection of life and death is so creative. My favorite part is easily the Wara Wara. These little marshmallow guys are so freaking cute. Mahito is a simple, yet very compelling protagonist. You can tell he's still struggling with the grief of his mother in a very natural way. I especially like how he clearly has mixed feelings towards Natsuko, yet he doesn't feel bitter or jaded towards her, so his mission to rescue her does feel believable. And the Heron is probably my favorite character in the movie. His design is amazing, and I love how begrudgingly he feels to have to help Mahito. And Himi is really charming too. I think it goes without saying that this movie is absolutely gorgeous. I'd expect nothing less from a bloody Miyazaki film. Speaking of Miyazaki, this movie does feel very personal with its connection to both his life and his past films.
Which makes total sense. This is his 4th final film, after all.
And it doesn't feel forced or distracting. It's one of those things that you only really notice in hindsight, which I really like since it doesn't feel like forced reference for the sake of being clever. Takes notes, wish. But sadly, this rewatch made the biggest problem with this movie a lot more apparent to me, and that's the pacing. A lot of the earlier scenes feel kinda dragged out, but then the climax is insanely rushed. It just kinda comes out of nowhere, and the goodbye scene between Mahito and Himi Linguini only lasts a few seconds, and this very easily could have been the most emotional part of the movie, but instead it feels like they just gloss over it. There's also a really weird edit where we go from him speaking with the tower's master to suddenly being captured by the parakeets, and it feels insanely jarring. Like, did we miss a scene here?
So yeah, that's why this movie is a bit lower than some of you might have expected, but I still think it's fantastic.
Like Flo, this is one of the few examples where I don't necessarily agree with this winning the Oscar, but at the same time I'm completely okay with it. I did like Across the Spider-Verse more, but not only was this the first hand-drawn movie to win in over 20 years, which is kinda sad honestly, but the first Spider-Verse movie already won, and we got the third one coming out too, so I guess they can miss this one. Though part of me does wonder if the third one will win, since the only sequels the Academy seems to like is Toy Story. No, seriously, Toy Story and 3 and 4 are the only sequels to ever win Best Animated Feature. None of the DreamWorks sequels have ever won, and the only other Pixar sequels to even be nominated are Incredibles 2 and Inside Out 2, which both lost, and the only other nominations were Across the Spider-Verse and Despicable Me 2. It's weird. Sorry for the side tangent, I just had to bring that up. Overall, 2023 was another pretty good lineup. The weakest was definitely Elemental, and even then, I still thought the movie was alright. Nimona is really good, not as strong as the top two, but I still wouldn't have been fine with it winning if for no other reason than to stick it to Disney, and I haven't seen Robot Dreams, but I've heard great things. Either way, Boy and the Heron was a really solid choice. While it wasn't my personal favorite of the lineup, I can't exactly complain either.
Dad! It's a rat! It's a rat! Kill it! Kill it!
This was not intentional, but I find it very amusing that these two are back-to-back, since I literally watched both of them for the first time in the same day. No, seriously, I saw Boy and the Heron in theaters, and then later that night I watched Ratatouille for the first time. And much like Boy and the Heron, I was very curious to see how I would feel about Ratatouille after a rewatch. Mostly the same, though I do have a few changed opinions. Mainly the third act breakup worked a bit better for me. Since I knew it was coming, I was able to spot more of the build-up to it, and while I'm still not a huge fan of it, I was more of accepting of it than I was last time. But sadly, my other two issues with this movie still bug me. There's some odd choices with the pacing, and I'm not really the biggest fan of Skinner. His paranoia over Remy is pretty funny, but the whole thing about him selling frozen food doesn't really add much to the story. It just feels like a way of making him seem like a worse person, and the part at the end with him kidnapping Remy is completely pointless. You could cut that out of the movie, and you would miss basically nothing.
Now that the issues are out of the way, let's get back to why this movie's awesome.
The bond between Remy and Linguini is really strong. I really like how Remy can't talk to Linguini, since it would have been a super easy and basic way to show them growing closer. But instead you have to focus more on the little details and how they communicate, and how they work together to cook. It feels natural, and like they are becoming more of a team. Same goes for Linguini and Colette. When she starts out giving him tips in the beginning, she's extremely stern with the more obvious things like being more efficient, but when it comes to the more subtle details like preparing food better, she becomes more soft-spoken, which I really like. A movie about making some form of art does its job really well when it makes you admire the art form in a whole new way, and this movie absolutely nails that. It really does make you appreciate cooking, even if you're someone who knows next to nothing about it like me. But Remy's sheer passion for creation combined with the unique ways they show each dish being prepared and how delicious most of them look gives you a great showing of how much work goes into something many people take for granted.
And the part at the end with Ego is just as amazing the second time around.
I love how his demeanor entirely changes when he takes the first bite. Not just his attitude, but his intention. When he gets the food, he immediately gets his pen ready to start jotting down notes for his review as if he's doing both simultaneously, but then the memories of his childhood cause him to drop the pen. He completely forgets that he's there to judge the place and just allows himself to enjoy the meal. It's crazy how this character with only a few minutes of screen time is able to leave such a big impact with people and have such a massive character arc that somehow doesn't feel rushed or forced. He's the best character in the movie, and yet I surprisingly don't feel like we needed more of him. But you know who we did need more of? The other cooks. They go through the trouble of giving most of the backstories, and yet they just end up being glorified background characters. Really wish we could have learned more about them. I may have some grievances with this movie, but I still think it's great, and while I haven't seen Persepolis or Surf's Up, I think I could still say with confidence that this movie deserved to win the Oscar.
And on that note, I think it's time we finally hear from Shane.
Now this is a film. This film feels like Pixar at their most adult. When I watched this later on in my life, I understood most of the themes better than I did when I was a kid. Remy is probably one of the best written characters Disney has ever created. His whole arc about becoming a chef and finding purpose other than being a rat is really well done. You do want to see him and Linguini succeed. Linguini is a very relatable character. His whole personality from being a clumsy busboy to a chef is amazing character development. Brad Bird is an exceptional director, and I wish he did more original work with Pixar. Also, the film blends really well. It's dramatic when it needs to be, and also, in my opinion, has some of the best jokes Pixar has ever written. Skinner is probably one of the best villains in Pixar's rogues gallery, along with Syndrome and Charles Munns. But compared to them, he is more dumb, which makes him funnier. Anton Ego is probably another one, but he has a good redemption arc, and he's voiced by the legendary Peter O'Toole. Anton Ego's flashback is probably one of the best flashbacks that Pixar has ever done. It shows him trying the ratatouille, it brings him back when he's a kid, and his mother serving the same dish to him. Also, the food in Ratatouille looks really good. It's probably some of the best looking food in animation. It deserved to win the award that it got.
I think we might have animated the house by accident. The house?
I think I can get away with saying the 2020s have not exactly been kind to Disney. What was once the most popular animation studio in the world has been fumbling the bag with a mediocre sci-fi movie that they didn't even bother advertising, a sequel that was literally 3 episodes of a TV series stitched together into a movie, and a 100-year celebration that was a total failure. But the diamond in the rough for them this decade is, without a doubt, Encanto. This isn't just one of the best modern Disney movies, it's one of their best movies, period. It's such a simple idea about a family that's given special powers which they use to help their community, yet the characters are so likable that it makes it super compelling. The way they use their different gifts to help people is really fun, but at the same time, they have so much pressure put on them that their struggles are very identifiable, and I really like how it affects them in different ways. Of course, you have Mirabel, who feels like the weak link in the family because she didn't get a gift, Antonio, who's worried about not getting one, but Mirabel helps him overcome his fears in a really sweet moment, Luisa, who's afraid that her entire purpose is tied to her strength, and if she loses that, then she has no value, and Isabella, who constantly has to appear perfect to the point where she's marrying a guy for the good of the family. But the way each of them overcome their struggles lead to some great character moments. Though sadly, if there's anything wrong with this movie, it's that they aren't balanced super well. Dolores has somewhat of an arc, but she still feels kind of like an afterthought, and Camilo gets completely sidelined. He's barely in the movie, which is a shame. Thankfully, the parents make up for that. Peppa is mostly used for jokes, but you still get a feel for her personality and how she constantly tries to keep herself calm for fear of starting a hurricane. Julieta is a great emotional support for Mirabel, and I like how she has healing powers and her husband is accident-prone. That makes them a perfect match. And I think the most interesting character in the movie is Bruno. The idea of everyone blaming him for his predictions being bad when he's just the messenger is amusing and leads to the most iconic song in the movie, but when you finally see him, it's honestly pretty tragic. The fact that he felt like he needed to drive himself away from everyone for their own good is really sad, and my heart broke a little when I saw the little dinner table he made for himself.
The most contentious aspect of this movie is easily Abuela, and I personally have really mixed thoughts on her. But that's the point.
She does put a lot of pressure on the other family members, and it is infuriating to see her blame Mirabel for everything, but not only does her backstory at the end explain why she did this, she actually apologizes for it. She realizes what she's done is wrong and takes full accountability, which is what makes her character work. The animation in this movie is about as good as you would expect. The lighting and the colors look gorgeous, and the way the different parts of the house move give it a surprisingly large amount of personality, and the soundtrack is as good as people say it is. There's a reason We Know Talk About Bruno took over the world for a bit, and I actually once heard Surface Pressure playing in a Spirit Halloween store. I'm not joking. Safe to say, Encanto was an all-around great movie, but did it deserve to win the Oscar? I say yes, but a lot of people were disappointed, and I think that's just because this was another Disney win. I mean, if we actually look at the other nominees, Raya and the Last Dragon was divisive, and I personally haven't seen it. Luca was quite good, but I wouldn't say it's a masterpiece, and...
Wait, Ham, what the heck is Flea? An animated documentary about a man fleeing from Afghanistan. Okay, that's a new one.
Of course, a lot of people were rooting for the Mitchells versus the Machines, which is really good, but I think that's more because it was the underdog rather than it was better. I would have been fine with that one, but I think Encanto is the best. If there's any modern Disney movie that deserved to win the Oscar, it's this one. So while it was a predictable choice, it was still a good predictable choice.
Oh, right, I forgot to mention that the songs were written by Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I'm one of the few people that didn't go through a full Hamilton phase, so someone who did, like Katie, should probably handle the rest of this.
Encanto is the most recent successful Disney movie, and I can definitely understand why it's been so successful. This film is beautiful and impressive in so many ways. First of all, the songs are awesome. I'm a sucker for a good Lin-Manuel Miranda soundtrack, and this is certainly one of them. Each of the songs are excellent in visuals and integrate the cast very well. We Don't Talk About Bruno really does live up to the hype due to the way it conveys the backstories and integrates every family member so well. I also really love Surface Pressure due to its energy, and it's apparently a song written as a tribute to Lin-Manuel Miranda's sister, which is really sweet. Waiting on a Miracle is another song I love, and I think it's really underrated. It's amazing to see Mirabel at such a breaking point after trying to say she was fine. Fun fact, the singer was in labor while recording this one, which is insane. Mirabel herself is a very identifiable protagonist. You feel bad for the way her family looks down on her. It makes you root for her and her aspirations so that way she can feel special and feel like she can stand alongside the rest of her family. And it's really sweet to see her look out for the good of the family. I especially love her bond with Antonio. I also love the family members. They are very memorable characters with fun personalities and dynamics, which is impressive for a larger family. I also really like Bruno. He's hilarious with how off the wall he can be. You also feel so bad for his situation, especially with how selfless he was in trying to protect Mirabel. This movie focuses a lot on intergenerational trauma, which is a commonly used plotline in the 2020s. While the trope has a somewhat mixed reception, I really love it, and Encanto is one of the films that uses it best. Connecting it to the concept of a family obtaining magical powers is a great idea. It also allows them to cover a lot of themes revolving around toxic family dynamics and perfectionism. Seeing the amount of pressure each family member goes through under Abuela's demands is really heartbreaking. And I love how these struggles don't really manifest until the pressure builds up to the point where they can't take it anymore, eventually leading to reconciliation. I especially love the beginning and ending parallels with the house, and how the ending version isn't perfect, and that's okay, neither are the Madrigals. Abuela's character is one that many people take issue with, but I don't think it's warranted. They very clearly establish Abuela's perspective with everything she does, and how hard she tries at protecting her family and the one thing her late husband left her. And the reconciliation with her works because she completely takes fault for the way her actions have affected Mirabel and everyone else. She doesn't excuse them behind her trauma, and she strives to do better going forward. Overall, this movie is amazing. It's a really fun musical that also has a lot of great emotional moments that will really move you. As much as I love Mitchells vs. the Machines, I think Encanto is objectively a more polished movie and deserved to win Best Animated Feature in 2021. Definitely a modern Disney classic for very good reason.
Let's go, Tybalt! Great adventures await!
So, I have kind of a sad confession to make. I'm not really the biggest fan of stop-motion animated movies. Now, don't get me wrong, this is an art form I have a huge amount of respect for. It takes so much time and effort to make this kind of stuff, and anyone who has the talent and patience for it deserves to be commended. But for me, a lot of the time, it just looks kinda off. It's mainly the facial expressions. Many movies kinda enter the uncanny valley for me. I don't think it's a coincidence that when you look at the most popular stop-motion movies, there's Wallace and Gromit and Chicken Run, which have more distinct and cartoony art styles, Coraline and Paranorman, which are meant to look kinda creepy given the darker stories, and Nightmare Before Christmas and Corpse Bride, which are both. As much as I admire the labor of this art form, personally, it's not one I can get into as much as a lot of other people do.
And with that out of the way, I think Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is the best stop-motion movie I have ever seen.
I mean it, this movie is absolutely fantastic. I'll admit I haven't seen any of Del Toro's other films, but I know he's a very well-respected director, so hearing he was making a Pinocchio movie definitely got me interested. And it was really amusing that it came out the same year as two other Pinocchio movies, which were the epitome of the phrase the good, the bad, and the ugly. But wow, did this movie just knock it out of the park. Stop motion is normally pretty choppy and jittery due to having to be physically moved, but this is some of the smoothest animation I've ever seen come from this art form. And the character designs all really work. The non-human characters are extremely creative, and Pinocchio especially is able to convey so much personality. The humans can look a little off sometimes, but I think it still works well enough. The voice acting is fantastic across the board, which isn't too surprising given that this is a stacked cast like Ewan McGregor, Tilda Swinton, Finn Wolfhard, Christoph Waltz, Kate Blanchett, and Ron Perlman. And they surprisingly do a really compelling take on this classic fairy tale. It pays tribute to the original story and keeps the most important elements, but adds enough changes to make it really stand out on its own. I thought sending it at the beginning of World War II was a really strange choice, but it actually works. Pinocchio is an inherently dark story, so giving it the backdrop of one of humanity's darkest moments doesn't feel too jarring, especially since it doesn't take up a huge aspect of the story aside from one section where Pinocchio goes to boot camp.
Plus, I'm extremely grateful I get to live in a world where I can say Benito Mussolini is voiced by SpongeBob, and that's not a joke or a parody skit.
Pinocchio himself is really charming. The way he reacts to everything really does feel like he's seeing the world for the very first time. He has that childhood innocence that makes him feel like a real kid, which is super impressive. And what's really interesting is that the main theme of him trying to become a real boy is more metaphorically than physically. His goal isn't just to be real in the sense that he's made of flesh and bone, but instead to understand the value of life, and more importantly, the meaning of death. He dies several times throughout the movie, but is given the ability to come back, but he ends up giving that ability up so he can save Geppetto. This is a really clever spin on the original idea that, like I said, feels unique while still keeping the spirit of the source material. Jiminy, or Sebastian J. Cricket, doesn't play a huge role in the story, but he does provide some really good comedic moments, and I love how Geppetto feels like an actual character instead of just the kind fatherly figure. They give him an actual backstory of him losing his son in a bombing raid, which makes for a really powerful opening and leads to him building Pinocchio in a drunken stupor, which is both funny and kinda tragic. I also love how Pinocchio's design reflects this, since he looks a lot more jagged and unfinished than in most versions of the story. And while he's initially very hesitant to accept Pinocchio as his son, his growth to care about him as the film goes on is super compelling and leads to some great emotional moments. As for any issues I have, I think Geppetto and Sebastian get eaten by the sea monster a bit too early, since they disappear for like 30 minutes, and I think they should have put that scene a bit later in the movie, but that's just a me thing. And the songs aren't bad, but they are shockingly forgettable, and by that I mean I genuinely forgot most of them were in the movie until I rewatched it.
That is, with the exception of one song. Ciao Papa.
This song is hauntingly beautiful. It's a great demonstration of how much Pinocchio cares for his father and perfectly captures the feeling of saying goodbye to a loved one. Seriously, how did this not get an Oscar nomination for Best Original Song, and why is this kid such a good singer, and why is this the only big project he's ever been a part of? Whatever, I think this movie is extremely powerful, and while this year did have another great lineup, it wasn't really a competition when it came to the winner. I did really like Turning Red. I didn't see the Scene Beast or Marcel the Shell with shoes on, but they do look interesting, and I know most people would have given it to Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, which is great and all, but I say this totally deserved not just the Oscar, but all of the praise that it received as a beautiful work of art. Because, as Del Toro himself said, animation is cinema.
It's also worth noting that the very first time I saw this movie was with Shane when it first came out. Which reminds me,
Del Toro's Pinocchio was probably a film that was in development hell for such a long time, but thankfully the wait was worth it because it's probably one of Del Toro's best films. The stop motion is probably some of the best ever put to screen, just behind the stuff that Leica Studios are doing. I like how Del Toro chose to set his version during Mussolini's Italy because it tackles the theme of fatherhood and authority using the regime as a metaphor for Geppetto's relationship with Pinocchio. The only flaw in this film is that the songs are kind of forgettable, but that's not really bringing the film down. And the character of Pinocchio is really well done. Pinocchio's arc about wanting to explore the world and wanting to be a real boy is probably the most iconic in all of fiction. The voice acting in this movie is probably some of the best. Ewan McGregor as Jiminy Cricket is just phenomenal. But Cate Blanchett, it was really good as well. Christoph Waltz, everyone was amazing. This also has like some of the saddest sequences in any animation. Geppetto's son getting killed in the bombings during World War I is just devastating, but when Geppetto's grief caused him to create Pinocchio. But overall, this film is amazing, and it's probably one of Del Toro's best. And also, remember, animation is a medium, not a genre.
I'm a superhero!
No, it was not intentional to put this in the exact same spot it was in the Pixar ranking, but that should give you an idea of how great this movie is. Though frankly, I don't even need to explain why, since The Incredibles is easily one of the most beloved animated movies ever made, and rightfully so. This is a movie I've loved ever since I was a kid. The animation can look a little dated, mainly on Helen stretching when she isn't in her suit, but for the most part it's pretty good. The character designs strike a good balance of being realistic and cartoony, so they are distinct and expressive, and don't feel too close to the uncanny valley. The action scenes are awesome, the story is a really fun deconstruction of the superhero genre, with the iconic "You Got Me" monologuing scene being the most iconic. And this movie has really impressive sound design. The score perfectly encapsulates the music of the film's time period, and the sound effects are fantastic. Of course, where the movie really shines is the characters, which is also where it falls a little flat, mainly because we don't really see many of them. The first half of the movie is almost exclusively about Bob, which isn't a bad thing, but it does lead to the rest of the family feeling kind of sidelined. But thankfully, they still manage to remain likable, and no matter who's on screen, you do like seeing them. Well, that is with the exception of the most despicable villain in animation history. Oh, not Syndrome, Mr. Incredible's boss. Screw this guy, he deserved to get thrown through a wall. Aside from him, I love just about everyone in this movie. Bob and Helen are really interesting, Dash and Violet get some great laughs, Jack is adorable, Edna is iconic, Syndrome is one of the best villains in any animated movie ever, even Mirage is interesting, with how she turns on Syndrome after he shows no concern for her life. And we can't forget about the Tricycle Kid. Seriously, I love this kid, he's hilarious.
This movie has plenty of funny moments, but they also balance it out really well with the darker ones.
This movie honestly gets really intense at points. Helen telling the kids that they will be killed by the soldiers if they get caught, Mr. Incredible hiding under the bones of his dead friend, this scene that legit freaked me out when I was a kid, and of course him discovering how many Super Syndrome has killed. That unfortunately is a little hard for me to take seriously now since I can't watch it without thinking of this video. Even just the subtle things like Bob and Helen having different ideas on settling down only for those to be flipped when it actually happens, or seeing some of the Supers that are later killed in the background of their wedding. There's a lot of great touches in this movie that really do add up. Like most people, I love The Incredibles, and I am super happy it won the Oscar. Shrek 2 is great and all, but it really doesn't hold a candle to this. Oh, right, there was also Shark Tale. Why are you here?
I don't think I have much left to say without repeating myself, so let's pass it over to Quinn.
The Incredibles is quite good. It blessed us with Edna Mode.
Now you must acquire a taste for freeform jazz.
I've watched Soul 3 times now, and it has genuinely gotten better with each viewing. This is easily the best winner of the decade so far, at least in my opinion, and it's not hard to see why. The animation is crazy impressive, and the characters are insanely likable. Joe and 22 have great chemistry together, both from a comedic and dramatic standpoint. 22 slowly growing to appreciate life as she actually experiences it is really heartwarming, and it's through those same experiences that Joe realizes he's been taking life for granted. I really like the line Dorothea gives him about a fish looking for the ocean. It shows how he's been so focused on achieving something that he's completely unaware what he's really looking for is all around him.
What really stood out to me on this viewing, though, are the character designs.
The souls all follow the same template, but the little details on them are enough to make them stand out, which I really admire. And the same goes to the Jerrys. They could have just given them all the exact same design and it wouldn't have been that big a deal, but they take a very basic structure of a character that's literally just an outline and make a big variety of different forms they can take, and that is crazy commendable. Also, one of them is voiced by Richard Ayoade, and I watched this right after seeing the Phoenician Scheme, which he was also in, and that is literally all I could think of when hearing his voice. I also love the contrast between Terry and the Jerrys. Terry is extremely uptight and cares about the validity of everything he does, while the Jerrys just kinda go along with whatever happens and don't take things too seriously.
In fact, I have a theory that Terry was originally named Jerry, but then he decided to change his name to make himself feel more important. Tell me he wouldn't do something like that.
The climax is really powerful as we finally get to see why 22 was so hesitant about going to Earth. She's afraid that she wouldn't be good at living, which sounds crazy, but is actually something that a lot of people can relate to. And those fears were only amplified by the frustration of all her past mentors. The imagery of them all continuously berating her is downright heartbreaking, especially Joe's, but when he finally manages to get through to her, it's extremely touching. Sadly though, I'm kinda mixed on the ending. I want to be clear, my issue isn't that Joe lives, my issue is that they come so close to making it look like he's gonna die, only to pull back right at the last minute. We have this entire sequence of him giving 22 her Earth pass back, him guiding to Earth only to have to let her finish the journey on her own, and then waiting on the escalator ready to accept his fate. And then Jerry shows up and is like, actually, we're giving you a second chance. Yay! I don't think he needed to die. I just think this could have been reworked so that it felt like less of a cop-out. Still, Soul's one of the best Pixar movies ever made, and as of now, it's their most recent win. Yeah, we've now gone a record-breaking 4-year streak without a Pixar win, and again, 3 years without Pixar or Disney. Because of both of those factors, I'm really glad this movie won. I did really like Onward. I haven't seen Over the Moon or Shaun the Sheep Farm again, and I've heard really good things about Wolfwalkers, but once again, this was a predictable choice. That was also the correct choice.
And with us reaching the top 6, we're in the final entries for each of the panelists, so let's start this wrap-up tour with Daniel.
You know, I think this is a film that's as much about a shift in perspective as it is about life. This isn't a personal film. Despite me only seeing it twice, it feels very personal because I saw this at a time in my life that I really needed to see it. I was a freshman in college during the COVID years, and I was still disappointed by that musical I tried to make and how much of a failure it ended up being. Long story, not going into it. And, you know, I was sitting and I was just questioning, oh wow, if I can't make that musical with this pandemic screwing everything up, then what am I supposed to do with myself? And then I saw this movie, and I thought, wow. I was pretty much in the same rut as Joe, and that is why I'm so glad the film was paced the way it was, because this is a film that not only gets characters out of a mental rut, it explains why it's so easy to fall into that mental rut in the first place. The message isn't rushed into, it's gone through slowly, and the characters are given time to react to it. And there are even moments where the characters go backwards and go further from the message and regress in their character arcs rather than going forward, but that's okay because not only is it incredibly human, but it also allows them to articulate better why they are in the ruts that they're in the first place. I'm thinking of the scene where Joe explains to his mother how he's afraid of living a meaningless life in particular. True to the film's message, I think that the little moments in the film are the most powerful. My favorite scene is the scene where 22 in Joe's body gets a haircut. When I saw this film for the first time my freshman year, this was the scene that made me go, wow, maybe I have a worldview that's causing me pain. And I gotta get this off my chest. Let me just objectively say that Joe had to live at the end. Take the movie Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania and Tulsa King Season 2. What do these two pieces of media have in common besides being bad? A lack of consequence. The events that occur don't change the characters in meaningful ways, and they end their journeys in too similar of a position to how they started. Now take Soul and the Doctor Who Christmas special Last Christmas. What do these two pieces of media have in common? They have consequences which complete the character arcs of the protagonists. At the end of Last Christmas, when the Doctor saves Clara from the dream crab, he realizes she's old and he missed her life. He realizes that he took his friendship with her for granted and he missed her life, and he'll never get to show her how much she truly means to him. So the Doctor wakes up and saves Clara from the dream crab for real this time, and she's still young, and the two of them finally get to have a second chance at fully appreciating each other's friendship. That ending is not a cop-out. That is a complete character arc. If Joe died, his character arc would not be complete. He has to live and fully experience what he was missing. His life was meaningless before, not because he had no purpose, but because he would not live. He inspired the Jerrys because he unknowingly showed them the importance of sensation and experience. If he doesn't go out and fully experience all of that himself, his character arc would not be complete. Also, I think Terry's a pretty good villain. First of all, Terry is a good parallel to Joe. He's only focused on his task, and he never slows down, never really enjoys himself. Second of all, I'm fine with him having a relatively small presence in the film compared to other Pixar villains, because This is a film that really doesn't need a huge overarching villain like the scary, nightmarish demon teddy bear known as Lotso. Anyway, after seeing this film for the first time my freshman year, I decided, you know what? Maybe instead of being upset about this musical that I haven't made yet, maybe I can go relax a bit and watch some Ben 10. And so I did.
Happy, happy, joy, joy. Happy, happy, joy, joy. Happy, happy, joy, joy, joy.
Inside Out is 10 years old now. Yeah, I feel just as weird saying that as you probably did hearing it. In fact, if you really want to feel weird, the gap between this and the sequel is only 2 years shorter than the gap between Toy Story 2 and 3, and the same gap between Toy Story 3 and 4. Hard to believe how much time has passed, and even with that, this movie holds up super well. The animation is easily the best to ever come from Pixar at the time. The tiny particles and the emotions are crazy impressive. The emotions all feel like distinct characters, as well as reflections of what's going on through Riley's mind, which makes for really effective storytelling. Riley and her parents are all very likable too, and of course, how can you not love Bing Bong? Your sacrifice will never be forgotten, my friend. The voice acting is all top-notch. It is a big celebrity cast, but it's one that really works. Amy Poehler brings just the right amount of energy, Phyllis Smith has a great lack of energy, Louis Black is perfect for anger, Bill Hader is his usual funny self, and Mindy Kaling is surprisingly tolerable. Crazy! Plus Richard Kind does a fantastic job as Bing Bong. Also, I'd like to point out that the two subconscious guards are voiced by Muppet legends Frank Oz and Dave Goelz, and I just think that's neat.
But surprisingly, I think the weakest aspect of this movie is the comedy.
That's not to say it's bad. The running gag of the gum commercial still kills me every time, but while there are a handful of really good jokes in this movie, there aren't as many as a lot of other animated films I've seen, which isn't automatically a bad thing, but it is an observation I had on this rewatch, and I think this movie could have been a lot funnier. That's the one aspect I think the second one did much better. Thankfully, the film manages to be super engaging regardless. The inside of the mind is some of the most genius world building I've ever seen in an animated movie. The story is a great showcase of the struggles someone, especially a kid, can go through when moving to a new place. I really like the little detail of how Riley's clothing reflects how she's feeling at that point in the movie, like at first she's wearing a rainbow, then yellow when she's trying to be happy, and then black when she can't feel anything. It's simple, but it helps. I really love how there's a build-up of Riley deciding to run away and how each of the emotions question whether or not they should actually be doing this, which just makes the weight of the whole situation that much stronger and the resolution hit that much harder, and the message about how sadness is an ultimately important aspect of life. Oh, it's so good. The biggest complaint I see lobbied at this movie is people asking why Joy didn't just send the core memories up through the tube, and the reason for that is if the other emotions touched it, they might have changed. You could argue that only sadness could do that, but still, the risk wasn't worth it. Inside Out is easily my favorite of Pixar's modern big three hits, and it is still a movie that really sticks with me all these years later. I say it deserved the Oscar, though I'm probably not the most qualified person to say that since I haven't seen Boy in the World, the Shaun the Sheep movie, or When Marnie Was There, but I did watch Anomalisa, and while that movie was certainly very ambitious, I think Inside Out is an overall better made film.
Even then, I'm just someone who really likes this movie. I mean, it's not like I love it so much that I literally chose my college major because of it. Oh, Katie!
As someone who has seen Inside Out countless times, this movie is one that gets better and better the more you watch it. Honestly, I could talk about this film for hours, but unfortunately I have a time limit, so I'll try to be brief. Emphasis on try. Joy is an insanely well-written protagonist. Her arc about realizing the value of sadness and the harm of pushing down negative emotions is so natural. You can easily identify with her thought processes and pick up on how they affect her actions, even during her ruder moments. Her growth is tremendous and, dare I say, underrated. Sadness's self-confidence issues are understandable considering her emotion and how she's treated. She also has a lot of funny and clever moments. One of which is her saying, "Crying helps me slow down and obsess over the weight of life's problems." This line, a line earlier in the story that is treated as a funny quip, captures the primary thesis of this movie. Anger, disgust, and fear are also great. Their actions and manner of speaking in each scenario line up perfectly with the thought processes of someone of a particular emotion would follow. I also love how, despite being characters meant to embody the emotion, they're still very well-established characters and not just constantly saying, "I'm this emotion." You have fear as a calculative nerd, disgust as a high-standards fashion girl, and anger as a protective man. I also love Riley and her parents. They have a great, relatable story, and they feel like people with defined traits, and not just props. Bing Bong's a great, goofy, and helpful guide to the main characters. This includes his tragic sacrifice that, along with the destruction of the preschool world, convey a secondary theme about growing up. The main theme about the value of sadness is so good. Oh my god, I cannot emphasize enough how thoughtful this theme was integrated into everything in a manner that complements the characters' arcs, as well as convey the importance to the audience. It can also help with similar situations, such as learning how to best help an individual with emotional problems. An example of the right way being Sadness talking to Bing Bong about his lost rocket, and an example of the Ronway being Riley's mother praising Riley for saying happy. Many talk about the emotion of this film, understandably so. This film has so many earned tear-jerking moments. In my most recent viewing of Inside Out, I cried 4 times, and that's not even the greatest amount of times I've cried watching this movie. The ending in particular always leaves me a sobbing mess. I also find the humor to be just as strong as the emotion, which is interesting because not as many people talk about it. There are so many funny gags. The gum commercial, Anger wanting to swear, Cloudtown murders, the general slapstick, and so many more jokes of insane variety that just leave me dying with laughter. The world building of the mind in this film is incredibly creative. There are so many portrayals of imagination, personality traits, memories, dreams, and more that make things not only well integrated with one another and easy to understand, but also a lot of fun, and in some ways very insightful. One particular example is the clown interrupting the dream, symbolizing fears rising from the subconscious, which is exactly how nightmares operate. I could talk at length at how each of these world-building elements are so accurate at conveying many other areas of psychology, but all I'll say is that overall, the world they made was so strong that, as Aiden alluded to, it made me realize that psychology is a fascinating subject that I wanted to know more about. This spark of inspiration eventually led me to study more on psychology and realize how passionate I am about it. So yeah, Inside Out is a very special movie to me. It literally changed my life, and I've never had a movie impress me in how well it excels at so many different aspects of what makes a movie work, and have them all complement each other so perfectly. It is, without any semblance of a doubt, my favorite Best Animated Feature winner. And on top of that, it is my favorite Pixar movie, my favorite animated movie, and above all else, my favorite movie ever made.
I honestly do wish I could take it all back. And not just because I'm stranded in space.
I'm in space.
Alright, now we're getting into the really good stuff. The absolute top tier, all-time banger movies that are not only some of my favorite animated films of all time, they're among my favorite movies ever. Case in point, WALL-E. I remember really wanting to see this movie when it came out, but unfortunately I wasn't able to in theaters. It wasn't until a few years later where they played it at movie night for my first year of summer camp. And I was really happy to finally see what I'd been missing out on for all that time, because I loved it, and that appreciation continues to this very day. The movie is a lot like Up, in that the main thing people praise about it is the beginning, but while Up that praise is used as a compliment, here it's used as a criticism. The first 30 minutes or so have almost no dialogue, but then once they reach the axiom, there's quite a lot of it, and many people say they would have preferred it if it stayed mostly silent. I can kinda see why people say this, but personally I think the axiom stuff is just as captivating as the stuff on Earth and essential to the movie, because we learned what exactly happened to humanity after the world became uninhabitable, but it will never recover unless they go back. I think that makes for a really captivating story, and it didn't need to just be the robots messing around on Earth, especially since it gives Eve an actual purpose.
Speaking of which, WALL-E and Eve might honestly be one of my favorite fictional couples ever.
They're a great example of opposites attract, both from the outside and the inside. Their designs couldn't be more different. WALL-E is very dirty, clunky, and didn't really have a lot of care put into him since he was just meant to be left behind and clean up humanity's mess, while Eve is much more pristine and slick, outfitting with far more complex technology since she was made to carry out a much more important mission. I love how despite them both saying very little, they have a huge amount of personality thanks to their actions and faces. WALL-E is very wide-eyed and innocent, while Eve is very direct and committed to her mission, which just makes her almost throwing it away at the end to save WALL-E that much more impactful. These two are so distinct from each other, but that ends up making their connection that much more heartwarming. There are so many adorable scenes with these two, and I honestly can't get enough of them. The Axiom has a really impressive design since it looks really cool and creative, but it feels cold and artificial, so while part of you wants to live on it, deep down you know that wouldn't be the best thing in the long run. And that's exactly what the captain realizes when he finally sees what life on Earth was really like. I think having humanity be on the ship for 800 years was a really smart decision, since it means this life is literally all these people know. The captain has almost this childlike wonder when learning about the Earth, and his desire to go back is a lot deeper than just, it's my home. I honestly kinda wish we got to see how the rest of the humans would react to this, but we only really get to see like 2 of them, and they don't do much. I love WALL-E so much. It is a powerful, engaging, and downright beautiful film that didn't just deserve to win Best Animated Feature over Kung Fu Panda, which is great, and Bolt, which I haven't seen, but is pretty mixed, but it should have been nominated for Best Picture. In fact, this movie is the reason the immediate following winners were nominated for Best Picture, since people were so pissed that WALL-E, as well as The Dark Knight, didn't get Best Picture nominations, despite being universally acclaimed, that the Academy expanded the number of nominees from 5 to 10. If they had done that before, this easily would have been nominated, and if they didn't, the next 2 likely would have not. I mean, maybe, but Toy Story 3, no.
I could keep going on about this, but I think Quinn should probably take his turn.
WALL-E is an out-of-this-world movie. WALL-E is the last remaining robot tasked with cleaning up all the garbage that has accumulated on Earth. One day the Axiom, one of the ships full of people who abandoned Earth when it became too polluted, sends a probe, Eve, too Earth to look for any signs of plant life. When she finds a plant, her and Wally are brought back to the Axiom and need to get the plant to the captain in order to bring the ship back to Earth. This movie, while not 100% devoid of dialogue, has the main characters of Wally and Eve primarily communicate to the audience using body language and other non-verbal communications. This is not an easy feat, but Wally's characters are expressive enough to pull it off. The sets in this movie are great. There are two main areas in the movie, the Earth and the Axiom. The dull colors of the Earth and the sterile white colors of the Axiom work really well. The detail that I really like is that the structure that Wally lives in has many slots for idle Wally units to stay. However, at this point, they are all filled with our Wally's treasures, with one slot remaining for Wally to sleep. It really brings out the feeling of isolation on Earth. The sterile white and bright lights of the Axiom is an unsettling contrast to the Earth. Despite the ship being full of people, it is completely spotless, and it really emphasizes how the humans in this world do nothing more than exist. I recommend this movie, but I will warn you that you are probably going to have the melody of "Put on your Sunday clothes" stuck in your head for the next week.
Spider Pig does whatever a Spider Pig does.
It's Spider-Verse, what the hell do I even say?
This is arguably the single most analyzed and second most acclaimed movie on this entire list. People went nuts for it when it came out, declaring it the best Spider-Man movie ever, and it is not hard to see why when you actually watch it. It is one of the most distinct visual styles in any animated film ever made. The comic book aesthetic and lower frame rate make for some of the most eye-catching sequences ever, but the movie's not afraid to get weird with the backgrounds, especially during the final battle in the particle collider, and the amount of little details are crazy, like the little onomatopoeias that pop up, Miles being terrified during his leap of faith, or hitting Spot with a bagel. The humor is absolutely on point. There are so many moments in this movie that still make me laugh hard, with my favorite being, do animals talk in this universe? Because I don't know how to freaking out. The story is both very simple and very complex. This movie arguably kicked off the whole multiverse craze, so there's some pretty complicated rules, but the main goal is just to get everyone back home and stop Kingpin, so it works very well. And the characters are crazy memorable. Miles isn't too different from past Spider-Man depictions, but his struggle is very identifiable, and seeing him grow over the course of the film is great. The leap of faith still gives me chills every time I see it. Peter is probably my favorite character in the movie, since he starts out at a really low point, but that makes his ability to pick himself up that much better. And I love how he and Miles both help each other grow into the people they need to be. Gwen doesn't have much of an arc, but she's still really cool, and thankfully we get some good setup for her in the next movie. And the other three don't really join about halfway through, so they can seem a little underdeveloped, but who really cares? They're all super creative and likable, to the point where you want to know more about them, so it really works. Seriously, why is the movie with Spider-Ham this good, and why do I love him so much?
I will admit though, there is one aspect of this movie that I do find a little lacking, and that's the villains.
They're not awful, but I wouldn't say they're among the best I've ever seen from an animated movie, or even a Spider-Man movie. Kingpin has a passable motivation and some great scenes, but overall he's not very memorable, and I'm just gonna say it, I do not like his design. He looks ridiculous. Where's his neck? Why are his shoulders bigger than his head? It's kinda hard to take him seriously sometimes because he just looks like this. As for the other two, Lady Doc Ock is cool, but we don't get to see that much of her, which is a little disappointing, and Prowler honestly feels more like a plot device than anything else. I get his connection to Miles is important, but he's barely in the movie, so it's kinda hard to get fully invested in him. That aside though, this is easily one of my top 5 favorite animated movies of all time. It's hilarious, it's epic, it's intense, it's awesome, it's Spider-Man into the friggin' Spider-Verse. I love the hell out of this movie, and while I am probably the biggest Incredibles 2 stan there is, even I fully admit that this movie completely deserved the Oscar. Especially since I haven't heard great things about the other 3 nominees. Apparently Isle of Dogs isn't the best, no one talks about Mirai, and the less said about Ralph Breaks the Internet, the better.
Despite me having a ton of respect for a lot of these movies, and these last 2 being among my favorite films ever, there's still 2 that managed to top all of them, because they are among the very rare selection of films that I give a perfect 10 out of 10. And if you saw my Pixar ranking and know a thing or two about animated movies, I think you can guess exactly which ones they are.
All I do know is that you're a spirit, and spirits gotta cross to the other side.
There are very few animated movies that have received the same amount of praise as Spirited Away. This is often hailed as the magnum opus of one of the most beloved animation studios in the world, and one of the most acclaimed animation directors to ever live. When I first saw this movie, I honestly had to let it sit with me for a while, because I didn't know that much about it beyond a few scenes. But the more I thought about it, the more I appreciated it. After watching it a second time, I can truly say it is worth all of the hype it has ever gotten. The animation is jaw-droppingly gorgeous, the backgrounds are so detailed, the character designs are wonderfully unique, and the movement is so so fluid. I cannot believe the amount of effort that must have gone into this.
I literally went out and bought the art book like a month after watching this movie for the first time. That's how good it is.
The story is extremely simple, but it ends up being very effective because the movie sucks you in so easily through its world and its characters. Remember how I said Boy and the Heron and Inside Out had some of the best world building in any animated movie ever? Well, Spirited Away has the best. I'm not joking, the world they create in this movie is one of the most engaging and fascinating places in any piece of fiction I have ever seen in my life. I want to know every single possible thing about how this place works. What are these people like? What else is out there? How do these spirits live their lives? What other spirits exist? You could give me a Lord of the Rings length appendix on this place and I would read every single word of it. And I don't just mean the same length as Lord of the Rings appendix, I mean the entire book too. Chihiro is a fantastic protagonist because she's very relatable and grows so much over the course of the movie. She starts out as just a scared little girl, but she doesn't come across as whiny or cowardly. Anyone would feel like this in her situation, especially at her age. But she still faces every challenge that comes her way and overcomes things that she never would have dreamed of. The fact that she goes from panicking while going down a flight of stairs to riding on the back of a dragon without even flinching proves how far she comes. But she's not the only one. The rest of the characters are incredible too. Haku and Lin serve as a great support system for Chihiro and help her survive this crazy place. The Boiler Man is delightful and I love his legion of soot workers. No Face is such a fascinating idea of a creature that gives just as much as it takes. Even Ubaba is interesting. What may seem like a basic greedy witch shows much more of a human side over the course of the movie, particularly with her baby. And she actually does praise Chihiro when she does her job well, which I really like. But on the flip side, her twin sister, Zeniba, is her polar opposite in that she's mostly kind and caring, but does have a bit of a darker side to her, which I also really like. This movie really feels like you are pulled into a strange new world and simply witnessing what unfolds inside of it. And it really works because there are so many memorable moments. Helping the Boiler Man, cleaning the River Spirit, fending off the Paper Birds, No Face going crazy, Haku remembering who he really is, the garden, the train ride, the ending. It's all incredible. Spirited Away is genuinely one of the most impressive movies I have ever seen in my life. It goes beyond the line of magical. It is ethereal. It is one of my top 3 favorite animated movies of all time, and honestly, my favorite hand-drawn animated movie that I have ever seen.
So, do I think it deserved to win? Of course it deserved to win! It's Spirited Away!
And I can say that with confidence because this is the only 5-nominee year where I've actually seen all of them. Okay, I haven't seen Ice Age since I was a kid, but even back then I wasn't a big fan of it. Both Treasure Planet and Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron have really big followings, but personally I didn't get that into them. And Lilo and Stitch is really good, but that doesn't even come close to how amazing this is. But the craziest thing about Spirited Away is that somehow, despite all this praise, it's only number 2. Yeah, sorry to have this be the number 1 spot on 2 separate rankings, but yeah, I can't help it. Admittingly, Spirited Away is probably an objectively better movie, but I don't care. This is my ranking, and I do what I want. Plus, almost everyone has that as the best movie, so this makes mine a bit more unique.
But since this is the number 1 entry, we're going to check out the panel before I give my thoughts rather than after. So let's head over to our final panelist of the night, Shane.
Finding Nemo. Probably Pixar's most nostalgic film they've ever made. It's probably one of the funniest Pixar films and also one of the darkest. The opening scene with Nemo's mother's stare has been ingrained in my memory since childhood. Also, the scene with the diver rising and kidnapping Nemo, again, probably traumatized a lot of kids, especially people my age. But the whole story about a father and son fending on their own is very interesting to see where their adventures go. Of course, onto a more lighter topic, the sharks are really funny. Bruce the Shark can be terrifying then be funny in a quick second. Of course, fun fact I could like to mention here, Bruce the Shark is named after Bruce from Jaws. Like, there's a lot of stuff that about this movie that's really funny. Like, again, there's Darla, who tries to traumatize Nemo and throws him into the drain and gets water splashed in her face because she's a brat. John Ratzenberger's School of Fish pointing them into the direction where they needed to go is amazing because John Ratzenberger is a great actor and he's probably been in some of the best episodes of Cheers. Also, of course, Dory. Even say what you want about Ellen DeGeneres, but I feel like she was born to play Dory. Like, her personality works really well with the character, and how Dory always is alone and wants to be friends with Marlin, but Marlin is like, no, I'm focused on finding my son, I don't want to talk to you. But then later on, Marlin warms up to her, and yeah, they become friends at the end. Like, this movie, of course, deserved to win over the Brother Bear and the Triplets of Belleville, whatever that is. Brother Bear sucks. I know there's gonna cause an argument in the comments, but Brother Bear is not a good movie, and Finding Nemo is better.
Well said, man. Anyways, anyone who saw my Pixar ranking should know how much I love this movie, since, well, I love basically everything about it. The animation holds up extremely well for a 20-year-old CG movie, the colors are so vibrant, and the water effects look great. Marlin is a fantastic protagonist, since the incredibly dark opening scene is a great explanation for why he's so overprotective, but he still manages to remain likable. Nemo is a very realistic depiction of a kid, since he does bicker with his dad, but he still cares about him, especially when he's thrown into such a scary situation like this. Dory really goes above the dopey sidekick tropes, and she not only has a great arc, but is integral to Marlin being able to achieve his goal. The emotional moments are extremely powerful, the suspenseful moments are legit really intense, especially for a family film, and the comedic moments just hit bullseyes every time. This is up there with Spider-Verse and Curse of the Were-Rabbit as the movies that made me laugh the most that I've talked about today. And the side characters are fantastic across the board. The sharks are hilarious, the turtles are lovable, Nemo's classmates and Mr. Ray are really funny, the School of Fish is a riot, and I love the Tank Gang. They may seem a little gimmicky since each of them have one main joke, but I don't care because all of their jokes make me laugh. And Gil is a legit really good character. He really helps Nemo become a lot braver, and his desire to escape is pretty interesting. Fun fact, his species of fish are actually known for trying to escape captivity. No, seriously, look it up.
This movie is pretty much divided into two main plots, Marlin and Dory trying to find Nemo, and Nemo trying to escape the tank, but they mesh together perfectly.
It never feels like we focus on one for too much longer than the other. Every scene is given just the right amount of time, and then it transitions back to the other storyline very naturally, so the movie is always engaging. It helps that both of these plotlines are so well written on their own. Darla arriving to presumably kill Nemo provides a surprising sense of dread, and when she finally does show up, they make this little girl surprisingly kinda terrifying, which also makes it pretty funny. And Marlin's journey is so expertly crafted since every step feeds into the next one. The sharks lead to the mask leads to the School of Fish, they lead to the gorge with the jellyfish, which leads to the sea turtles, which leads to the whale, which leads to Sydney, which leads to the pelican, which leads to the dentist's office. You can tell a lot of time and care was put into mapping out everything in this movie, and I really like how there is more crossover than just at the end. As I discussed in my Pixar ranking, my favorite scene in the movie is when the different sea creatures pass along Marlin's story, since it really shows the weight of just how crazy it really is, and how determined he is to find his son. But it's through this story that Nemo finds out his dad is looking for him, and that only strengthens his resolve to get back, which doesn't end up working, but still, it's a great moment. The whole confrontation in the dentist's office is hilarious, but the scene that follows with Marlin giving up and leaving Dory behind is heartbreaking. This is one of those movies that makes you work for its happy ending, but when it finally gives it to you, man does it feel good.
I could seriously go on for ages about this movie, but I think you all get the picture by now.
I absolutely adore Finding Nemo. It's been one of my all-time favorites ever since I was a kid, and that hasn't changed one bit. So, of course, it deserved the Oscar, and honestly, I think this is the most single clear-cut winner in the category's history, not just because it's amazing, but because it had pretty much no competition. No one talks about the triplets of Belleville, and Brother Bear is not good. I'm sorry to anyone who grew up with it, but yeah, just gotta accept it. I say this as someone who's never seen the movie, but I've heard almost nothing but bad things about it, so I think it's fair. Either way, Finding Nemo is a movie that deserved every piece of praise it got upon its release, and it will always hold a special place in my heart.
And that is all 24 of them. Again, this video ended up being a lot longer than I anticipated, but I hope I was able to at least elaborate more on the movies I've discussed previously and give some recognition to the ones I haven't.
Everyone jokes about how the Oscars don't mean anything, but since they've been making much more artistically pleasing movies in the past few years instead of just whatever their kids like, I'm hoping we have a bright future ahead of us. At least in this category anyway. They made some very questionable choices in the past, but they've also made some pretty smart ones, so at the very least, I'm glad I was able to revisit a lot of these movies. Thank you all for watching, and an extra special thanks to my friends for helping me out with this. Plus, as a bonus, here's my ranking of all the nominees that I've seen. Don't take it too seriously, I didn't put that much thought into it. Alright, see ya. Don't let the door hit you on the way out.